This is a Sports Catastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. I know that there was no video yesterday. I apologize, but I couldn't find it on this day or a birthday boy to satisfy your taste. But anyway, it's December 19th, 1976. The Baltimore Colts were taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in a divisional playoff game. Now, the 1976-77 playoffs were famous for the fact that the Super Bowl was on January 9th, which is like unprecedented, like in a single digit day in January. I mean, usually it's like at least late January. The only reason why the Super Bowl was January 9th and not the 16th, as was previously proposed, was because Christmas Day fell on a Saturday. And the NFL didn't want to play games on Christmas Day. But people are saying, hang on a sec. The NFL usually doesn't play Saturday games on Christmas Day in the first place, back in 1976. Well, there was one tiny little problem. Because there were 4 divisional round games going on. You know, the winners of the 3 divisions at the time, the East, the Central, and the West, and both the AFC and NFC would make it. And then the top wild card, as in the top team that actually didn't win their division by record. So because of Christmas falling on a Saturday and they didn't want the divisional round being on the holiday, they decided to move the divisional round to December 18th and 19th. For that to happen, they would have had to start the regular season on September 12th. So that's what happened. So that the divisional rounds can be on division. So that the divisional rounds would be the 18th and 19th. And the AFC/NFC championship game would be both on the 26th, avoiding Christmas whatsoever. And then, of course, after the customary week off, they would play the Super Bowl at the Rose Bowl. So that's what happened. Now, anyway, the divisional round got off to a start as Minnesota were hosting Washington and won 35-20 with the great Vin Scully calling the game with Paul Hornung. Vin Scully is still alive, by the way. Or is he dead? I think he's dead, isn't he? Oh, yeah, he is gone. Because I did a thing about a tribute to Vin Scully. I always thought he was alive. But anyhow. So Minnesota beat Washington. The Raiders, with Kirk Gowdy and Don Meredith on the call, would face the New England Patriots. And the Patriots almost took care of the Raiders. Now, the Raiders were 13-1. Their only loss was to the Pats in Week 4. Now, this was the game in which the Patriots should have had it, but there was a controversial roughing the passer play called by the referee on Sugar Bear Hamilton, which gave Oakland the first down and all that. Anyway, the Pats were bitter about that call and all that. Anyway, this sucked. Anyway, so it's the third game of the divisional round. Steelers Colts. Jim Simpson and John Brody. Happening. And anyway, the Steelers were not doing that well. They actually faltered through the start of the season, being 1-4. And Terry Bradshaw was actually benched for a while, but then he came back. They would face the AFC East champion Baltimore Colts. Now, the game actually was started at 2 o'clock because at the time, Baltimore had a rule that they couldn't start any sporting event before 2 o'clock because it was a Sunday ordinance. Well, of course, that has changed since. Anyway. So the Steelers took on the Colts. The Colts were a decent team in the AFC East and all that. Pittsburgh started out quickly as Bradshaw threw a touchdown pass to Frank Lewis to make it 6-0. They missed the extra point, which was stupid. And then Pittsburgh would kick a field goal by Saskatchewan native Roy Gerela. He hits a 45-yard field goal, but he can't kick a small extra point. Anyway, Burt Jones, the Baltimore quarterback, came back and made it 9-7 with a touchdown pass to ML Carr, with Tony Linhart getting the Roger Carr. ML Carr is a basketball player, with Tony Linhart kicking the extra point. Unfortunately, though, Pittsburgh would score after a kickoff return set up a run. Reggie Harrison scored a touchdown, and the Steelers were up 23-7. Bradshaw would pass to Lynn Swann for a touchdown. Pittsburgh went up 23-7. Jarrella kicked the field goal to make it 26-7, and then Bradshaw had a touchdown pass to Swann again, 33-7. So Pittsburgh logically had everything all done and all that. The Colts would score a touchdown by Rosie Weeks, and then Reggie Harrison would score another touchdown to make it 40-14. So the Steelers beat the Colts 40-14. But if you look at the picture, if you're on the video link and you see the picture of it, you'll know that doesn't look like anything similar to it. Why is there a plane in the upper deck of Baltimore's Memorial Stadium? Well, that's the reason. Because of the fact that the Colts were being ambushed on home turf 40-14, the Steelers won. And then the Colts were famously doing their radio post-game, and then legendary former Baltimore Colt Art Donovan said, "Hey, there's a guy with a plane," and all that. Lo and behold, there was someone with a plane. It was buzzing around Memorial Stadium's upper deck, and then it crashed into the upper deck, spilling jet fuel, and it wasn't good. It was a Piper Cessna, officially. Now, if you think, oh, great, there's a plane crashing the upper deck of Memorial Stadium, there's going to be some casualties, there's going to be injuries, and everything. Well, here's the thing. You know that if your team gets blown out, it's not good. But there's always a silver lining to your team getting blown out. Because, it humbles them. But more than that, because of how the Colts were being ambushed by the Steelers, the fans left the stadium early. So practically, there weren't too many people staying in the stadium to watch the end of the fourth quarter. So because of that, the fan base left. There were no injuries, so there were no fans at the time in the upper deck, which is great, because then, all of this is that stupid pilot. But the pilot got charged with buzzing the stadium. I don't know what happened to him, but yeah, it was pathetic. It was a publicity stunt. And as the book The Worst of Sports says, and I still have it, if I can find it. Hopefully I can find it. It's not the worst call ever. It's The Worst of Sports. If I have it. Because I know they did a chapter on the Baltimore Colts. And, yes I did. Baltimore Colts. Hang on 1 minute. Yeah, bad friend. Trickery. Yeah, this is a fine book. Team issues. There we go. Franchise killing. Yeah, there's a chapter about the Baltimore Colts 75-83 in the book The Worst of Sports. I know it's from, what year is it? From 2007. It still holds up 15 years later. Yeah, the worst playoff defeat. They got blown up by Pittsburgh and all of that. It says the worst fan stunt. Probably enough that fan stunt was the same day as the Steelers beating the Colts. 20 minutes after the final gun, a Colts fan and licensed pilot crashed a small plane into the upper deck of Memorial Stadium. No one was hurt. The stands cleared out in a hurry after the game, and the fans were in no mood to hang around the scenes of their festivation. The Cessna dribbled fuel over the empty seats in the upper deck. But fire crews were on the scene, and Memorial Stadium was safe from going up in flames. So that was just pathetic and all that. Yeah, so like the Baltimore Colts. would do all of that. So, yeah, that really hurt the Colts. Baltimore would go on a little bit of a spree and come back to the playoffs, but then they get ass wiped by the Oakland Raiders. And yes, that was the Ghost to the Post game with Dave Casper. So, yeah, that was horrible for Baltimore. But thankfully, it could have been a disaster if it wasn't for fire crews and the fact that the fans did not want to stay around in the game. So the last divisional round game was at 5:30 Eastern time with the Rams and Cowboys playing, with the great Pat Summerall being the announcer, with Tom Brookshire being his color commentator. Now remember, John Madden was not out of coaching yet, so he wasn't paired up with Summerall. And the Rams somehow, in some way, won 14-12 in Dallas, of all places. This is like shocking. Pittsburgh would go on to get butt rubbed by the Oakland Raiders in the AFC title game 24-7. So Pittsburgh couldn't do anything about that. The Vikings would host the Rams in the NFC title game and win 24-13. So the Rams, even though they beat Dallas, they couldn't beat the Vikings. So the Vikings would play the Raiders in the Super Bowl, and the Raiders beat them, and that's when John Madden was carried off the field. That's the way it goes. And that did it. But for the Baltimore Colts, things would fall apart. Yes, they got to a few playoff games after that. But when Burt Jones got injured, the Colts faltered down the stretch, and they couldn't do anything. And by the time 1983 came, they were ready to leave Baltimore because they couldn't get money for a new stadium, so they shipped the Mayflower trucks all the way to Indianapolis, which had a dome ready for them, and they're now the Indianapolis Colts. And Baltimore couldn't get NFL football till 1996 when the Browns decided, screw it, we don't like Cleveland Stadium, we're going to get a new stadium. No, fine, we're going to Baltimore. But of course, that move to Baltimore was good for Canadian football fans like myself, because that meant that the Baltimore Stallions of the CFL would move up north and go to Montreal to be the Alouettes, and the Alouettes were one of the most consistent franchises in the CFL. Still to this day, but still, it is what it is. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond, I do.